If I upload my December wrap-up before the end of January, does that mean it's late? I don't think so. Hello, good morning, or good evening, whenever you are watching this. I hope you are doing well. My name is Catherine, and today we are going over my December reading wrap-up. I have, in fact, already filmed this video once, but I didn't realize the entire video was crooked. So we're gonna hope that the framing is okay in this one. Fingers crossed. Let's talk about all the books that I read in December, the last month of the year. A lot of my reading plans just kind of were lost. All that being said, it was I had an okay last month of reading. I read a total of 18 books, so not bad. Of those 18 books, 6 were ebooks, 4 were physical books, and 7 were audiobooks. Genre-wise, 6 of them were some sort of holiday related. 7 were contemporary, 2 were novellas. There's a lot of overlap in the genres, so you're gonna see more genres than books that I read. 4 I'm gonna classify as fantasy. 5 were graphic novels, and I read 1 children's book because I needed to fulfill a prompt in my Broke Bitches book buying bingo board band. Broke Bitches book buying band bingo board. Haha. Let's talk about these books. I'm gonna go mostly in genre order. I'm gonna start with the holiday books that I read. First story I'm talking about is Dear Monster Claus. This is a monster romance novella by Maven Black. What a book it was. Honestly, the dialogue was mediocre at best. And I will never look at candy canes the same way ever again. That being said, I cannot wait for book 2 to come out on Valentine's Day. It's about a Cupid and a Santa Claus who is a dragon in this world. Both of them think each other are mythical. The Cupid wants nothing but romance, and she is obsessed with Christmas. The Santa Claus dragon, has lost the Christmas spirit, and then he finds this Cupid. It was great. I had, it was a fun time. I read it entirely while my car was getting repaired, so, you know. Next one is Your Mean One, Matthew Prince by Timothy Janowski. This was narrated by Mark Sanderlin. I did not like him as a narrator, honestly. I think I've listened to something else he's narrated, and I don't think I mesh with his narration style. It's a fun, queer, Hallmark-like book. Follows Matthew Prince, who is kind of being cut off from his family after an incident. He is rich and fairly spoiled, but also deals with a lot of anxiety, and things just kind of happen around him. He ends up having to stay with his grandparents in this very small town, and there's this guy who is also staying with his grandparents. It's fun. It's cheesy. The dialogue isn't great. I did enjoy the anxiety representation in the book. However, I did find Matthew to be just insufferable at times. And I felt like both characters needed to grow a lot more before they stood any chance of their relationship actually working. Next is The Holiday Trap by Ronan Parrish. This is narrated by Natalie Duke, Pete Cross, and Hilary Huber. This book is basically a queer version of The Holiday. You know, that movie with Jack Black and Cameron Diaz and Kate Winslet and Jude Law. Iconic cast. I ended up really enjoying this one. I feel like a lot of authors would have tried to separate the 2 stories that were kind of happening between 2 books, made them companion novels or something. And I really appreciate that Ronan Parrish didn't, because I felt like the book just flowed really well, which is not something that I can really say for a lot of books that have that kind of 2 stories happening simultaneously in just fairly separate from each other. The romances were very cute, and I did really like the characters, just general growth. Next is Meet Me in Los Feliz by Kelly Reynolds. I just feel like I'm not really a novella person because I always just want more. I feel like it's very rare that I'm like fully satisfied by a novella unless it's like a book that's part of a bigger universe. And I felt that way about this one too, where like I genuinely would have read this as a like full-length novel. It's a like friends with benefits type situation, but of course feelings happen as they do. I did really like our main character, but I wanted more tension and more build up. And it just felt a little too insta love for me, despite it being like a friends with benefits type deal. I still really liked it. I just wanted more. Next was So This Is Christmas by Jenny Holiday. This was narrated by Cynthia Farrell, who I did not like as a narrator. I am so sorry. But the accents that were happening in this book threw me way off, considering like none of the characters really had these sort of accents in the previous books. On top of not liking the narrator, I just didn't like the book itself, honestly, which is very disappointing considering how much I like the first two books in this kind of like holiday-esque universe. Dialogue was just so stilted, and because both of the characters were like grumpy, it was a grumpy type situation. There wasn't really a good dynamic between them. I didn't really get any of the chemistry, which was again unfortunate. Everything was just very to the point, direct, and it missed so much of the like emotion to it. But again, like, no, I think it was the book too, not just the narrator. Then I read Love Light Farms by B.K. Borison. This is the first book in a series that I am kind of obsessed with. It's so freaking cute. This one is narrated by Pippa Jane. The main character, she owns a Christmas tree farm that is not doing well. She enters a contest to be visited by this like really like big time influencer who's also like holding a competition that would potentially get her Christmas tree farm some money. However, in the application, she put that she was dating someone. She is not, but she is very much in love with her best friend of 10 years. So she asks him to be her fake boyfriend. So it is a friends to lovers, fake dating, mutual pining. So cute. The entire like world of these three books is great. It like feels very Gilmore Girls, Stars Hollow-esque, and I really loved it. I personally loved the chemistry between the two characters. There were times that I wanted to just like slap the main character because she kept on trying to self-sabotage like everything, and very much like just couldn't ask for help. Which I get. I do think there was like good character development as far as that goes. Then I read the second one, In the Weeds. This is also narrated by Pippa Jane and Dane Andrews. Both were fantastic. Pippa Jane is definitely a narrator that I really enjoy. I've listened to some other stuff that she's done in the past. So this is the second book, and I don't know how much I can really say without spoiling the book, without like spoiling what happens kind of in the first one. But all I'll say is I'm obsessed with Beckett and Evie. I think they just have a really great dynamic. They had wonderful tension, such good chemistry. The third act breakup was a little frustrating and just very like just talk to each other, because it was just a miscommunication that I felt like would have been a lot easier to solve. I also love the fact that in this book, Beckett, he's like big burly farmer type dude, but he also gets like super easily overstimulated in loud settings, and I'm like, I love that. I love some overstimulation representation because like I've been there. The third book is Mixed Signals, again narrated by Pippa Jane, and this time Julio Maxwell. I was a little hesitant going into this one because I knew who the love interest was, and in the past two books he was a deputy sheriff, and I was like, I don't want to read a cop romance. However, at the beginning of this book, we find out that he had previously been fired from being deputy sheriff because he was too nice, and now he's a substitute Spanish teacher, and I love that. Thank you. Again, such good chemistry. Caleb is a wonderful soft dom king. Love him. And just the like pining in this book was again fantastic. Really just great pining overall in this series. And I think there's another book coming out soon. I think. Finally, in the like contemporary fiction realm, I read After Hours on Milagros Street by Angela M. Lopez. This was narrated by Stacey Gonzalez. There were some things that I really loved her doing. There were other things where I'm like, why are you making the main character just sound angry the entire time? I personally really enjoyed this book. I thought that our characters had a really interesting dynamic. Our main character, Alex, is very much like an unlikable female character, very strong-headed and very driven and very like kind of like typical masculine energy, and of course that is like painted to be a bad thing a lot of the time. This book follows her coming home after losing her job as like a pretty like well-renowned bartender, but she was over the sexism happening at the bar that she was working at. She goes back home and decides that she is going to take over her grandmother's business. There is a lot of disagreement on how the business should be taken over, and there is someone else who put in a bid on the building, Jeremiah Post, who is currently living over top of the bar in like the tenant housing. I really like their dynamic. I felt like there was a lot kind of going on in this book where at times it felt a bit unfocused. There was also like a paranormal element that I thought was pretty cool. And I also thought the whole just discussion of like Mexican culture in some place like Kansas, a place where you don't like typically think of there being a lot of like just a big Mexican community, I thought was really interesting and definitely had some cool like historical elements to it. I think Alex and Jeremiah have a lot that they need to work through. Both of them probably need therapy before their relationship can really work out. But overall, it was really enjoyable and I really liked it. Moving on to some fantasy, I finally finished A Strange Hymn by Lord Thalassa. It took me too long to read this book. Here's the thing. I did genuinely really like the first book in the series, despite some like problematic elements to it. This one, it just kind of fell apart. The world building is messy. The relationship is even messier. The dialogue is like absolutely atrocious. However, for some reason, I can't stop reading it, and I'm probably gonna pick up the next one because I have no self-control. I do know that it just got picked up by Source Books and probably had some editing done, so I'm hoping that some of these problems were edited out. We'll see what happens though. It's one of those books where it was a bit of a train wreck, but I couldn't look away. Then I read Gallant by V.E. Schwab. I really enjoyed this book, which was kind of surprising because I kept on hearing not great things about it, of people really not liking it, which was surprising for me because so many people love V.E. Schwab. This was very different than especially a lot of her more recent work. It felt very like middle grade, which isn't a bad thing. I just feel like since I had pretty low expectations going in, it wasn't surprising to me. I also feel like so many of V.E. Schwab's books are not at all alike to each other. So I don't know, maybe again, I went in with the expectation of this is going to be something different than previous works that I've read of hers. It was spooky, but in the way that like the Spiderwick Chronicles are spooky, kind of scary horror elements to it. It follows a girl who is unable to speak. She doesn't know about her family or her parentage, but one day the like orphanage that she is living in, she gets a letter and it says that her uncle has been looking for her and she's taken to this house. However, she has the journals of her mother. Something happened and people think that her mother went mad, but there's obviously a lot more to the story than just that. I thought it was pretty cool, just the world in general, and this very like keepers of the gate to the other side type vibe that it had going on. Yeah. It just, read it as if it's a middle grade, and I think you'll like it more. Next is The Other Merlin by Robin Snyder. This is another book that took me a while to read. This one is no fault of its own. It's just another book that I picked up despite me just like not being able to really read fantasy, especially like YA fantasy for a little while. But I did really like it. It follows Emery Merlin, whose father was kind of the court wizard for a while. He unfortunately like passed away, and then her brother is called to train to be the new court wizard. How he's not very good at magic, and she goes in his place. And then from there it is a, you know, King Arthur type retelling. What I loved in this one is that Arthur is not your normal typical Arthur in the way that he's like strong and like very like athletic and like burly and kind of like himbo-ish. He's very like book smart, which is very different than the normal like Arthur that we get. I didn't love the sort of modernized dialogue, despite the fact that it is taking place in like a medieval England setting, but it wasn't like overly distracting for me. I did also feel like the romance moved a little bit too fast. I would have liked it to be a little bit more slow burn, especially since we do have book 2 coming out. It wasn't bad, and I still had a really great time. Just like little nitpicky things. Moving on to graphic novels. I did make a whole video about graphic novels in general, and I believe all of these are in that video, so you can go ahead and check that out. First one being Taproot by Kizzy Young. I thought this one was just super cute. It's about a gardener and a ghost, and the gardener doesn't know that he's like actually like a necromancer. Also, the like art style is just gorgeous, so pretty. Then I read Aquacorn by Katie O'Neill. Very cute. Talks about like ocean conservation and like the problem with like overfishing, things like that. Adorable. Really, really loved it. Love the art style. Also by Katie O'Neill is Tea Dragon Society. This one is very cozy fantasy. Just about a group of people who take care of tea dragons, which is really fun. I desperately want a tea dragon. Next is Garlic and the Vampire by Brie Paulson. It is about these sentient vegetables that help a witch with her garden, and they grow like, you know, normal versions of themselves to sell. It's a little weird, but we're not going to think about it too much. But a vampire moves in to the castle nearby, and the other vegetables vote that Garlic needs to go confront him because, you know, vampires don't like garlic. So it's really cute. It's very fun. Again, art style, just adorable. Very cozy. Finally, in graphic novels, I read Crumbs by Danny Sterling. I had read like part of this on Webtoons a really long time ago, but it like finally came out in print, and it is so cute. It's about this like young seer who goes to this magical cafe every single day and always orders tea with a side of romance is the pastry. Each pastry has different things, like you can order confidence or romance or whatever else. I love that there is this message of like change and growth, and like you don't always have to be a people pleaser, which was very nice. And the romance in it was very sweet, although also like heartbreaking at times. I was very, very satisfied with the ending though. Art style just so pretty too. The final book that I read was this children's book. It is called The Water Protectors, and it's about the pipelines that are being drilled through indigenous lands and about like protecting the water. It is absolutely stunning, just the art style and also the like message and like education that it brings through a children's book. Overall, just really like powerful story. I'm like, oh my gosh, this book is like, you know, 15 pages long. So good. All right, so those are all of the books that I read in the month of December. Despite everything working against me, I had a pretty good reading month. If you've read any of these books, go ahead and let me know, especially any of these graphic novels, because like I feel like I'm entering like a graphic novel era. I love them so much. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more videos like this, go ahead and hit subscribe. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and until next time, bye!